Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's Will Kern from Endless Events, and it's Wednesday, which means it's hashtag event icons. And today we're talking about an amazing topic that I was so excited. I think I even mentioned this in my episodes I'm excited for this year at the beginning of the year. And we're talking today about commoditization and why our industry is already commoditized and what we're going to do about it. If you missed the global event forum conversation that we had a couple weeks ago, which was in February, episode 154, you want to go watch that episode maybe before this. A little bit of a prequel talking about what the global event forum is and the topics we started to come up with about how we are being commoditized and how can we deal with it to not get commoditized. Well, Kevin White, who is joining us today, had an awesome viewpoint, which is that we already are commoditized. It's too late. The ship has sailed. And what are we going to do about it and where are we going to go? So tune into this week's episode of Event Icons where we will figure out what we're going to do now.
It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of Hashtag Event Icons.
Presented by Endless Events.
The show where you get to ask the icons of the events industry anything. Use the question panel on the webinar to submit your questions. Or you can hop on Twitter. Submit your questions with hashtag Event Icons.
We'll be answering your questions live during the entire show.
Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better conversation we can have. So please help share hashtag Event Icons on Twitter and Facebook.
Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com.
Now, without any further delay, this is hashtag Event Icons.
So as I said, we are joined by the amazing Kevin White in the house. This man needs no introduction, first of all, because we've already had him on the show so many times. So if you want to go find out more, go check out episode 154. And I'm going to try to do this on the fly and find it right away really quickly. And also episode 26, one of the OGs of the icons. And that's where you
26.
Hear his backstory. And just because we had you on a couple weeks ago and this topic is so in-depth, we'll keep it pretty brief to introducing Kevin. But Kevin's a absolute BA when it comes to the events industry, amazing event producer, extremely brilliant, talented man. And I'm so excited to have him on the show. But real quick, Kevin, just to give everyone a little glimpse in the last couple weeks since Global Event Forum, what have you been up to? And I guess if you can tie it into commoditization and what, because you kind of hinted, I think, in the last episode what you're working on. What are you guys working on in your business today and kind of to avoid that commoditization stuff?
Sure. Well, actually, one of the things that we've taken a sort of a pivot on or a change on is we're trying to add more of our own proprietary events to our portfolio rather than just client-based. We are taking a look at the future of learning and trying to get ahead of that need and how people in the industry take it in, look to it, utilize it, and try and really create a product that works very, very well for the modern day learning landscape. And so we're looking to really launch a couple of series this year. And so we're fast and furious putting it together. So keep an eye out in the next month for a great new product for business, starting with business owners, moving on to event designers, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just a real quick, some of the stuff we're working on.
I love it. I'm definitely going to dive into that, like what caused you guys to do the proprietary portion, because I think that's important to the conversation that we're going to definitely have today, because I think that is potentially something we can do to avoid being commoditized, obviously. So not, I guess our thing is we've already been commoditized. So I got to make sure I don't say the words we're avoiding. We're already there. So let's dive into the topic, because I know we had basically like we could talk about this for hours at Global Event Forum. But basically at the Global Event Forum, again, the topic was that how can we avoid commoditization? And I love that topic that we did that little offshoot kind of unconference, and you had a session that was, we're already commoditized and what we're going to do. And I think for one of the first times that in that time, that was when it really broke through, and I had some great ideas for how I'm going to evolve my business. So that's why I want to have us here today. But for those who don't know what we mean by this commoditization, can you give us for example, like what does it mean to be commoditized, and kind of what's your how would you define how the industry is being commoditized now?
Sure. And just to take a step back, so shout out to Alan Folkrod, who brought this topic up to ILEA, International Live Event Association, and said, I think this is worthy of not only just a few days of us focusing on it, but let's have this be a giant conversation. And it came from other industries, which is always the first place to look for where is the disruption coming. Is never look straight down the road or straight behind you. It's good. You're going to get T-boned by whatever's going to take you out.
Coming from the sideways.
And the basic premise is creative services, things that feel like, oh, there's zero way that this could become commoditized. It's happening. It's you want to say it's on the edges. The toast is starting to brown. Whatever it is, maybe we're not burnt to a crisp yet, but the signs are there. And so if you're going to be smart as an industry, you need to know long before, right? What's the analogy? The frog in the pot of water. You need to know that somebody turned that water to boil, and it's going to start boiling soon. So we got into some in-depth conversations, and it did start with, okay, that sounds great. Alarm bells ringing. Oh my goodness! But what is commoditization? And from a dictionary standpoint, you're talking about the ability to be swapped out one as a product with another company's product with almost no discernible difference. There's a definition called fungibility, right? Has nothing to do with mushrooms or having a good time. Fungibility, and again, so think of, the grand example is think of a package of flour. I mean, it's flour. It's in a package. Almost every package looks the same. Almost all the quality of flour is almost exactly the same. There's absolutely no discernible difference if you were to grab one versus another. And so the race in that is price. So you go, I'm just going to select on, can I find the lowest price for what I need? A pound of flour. Great, got it, and off you go. And so this is what commodities are known as. Love the scene in Trading Places where they're explaining to Eddie Murphy what commodities are, the Duke brothers. And so there's a lot of things that are like that you buy and sell, and they're completely interswappable. What that does is, one is it means there's a giant market for it because everybody needs it. Commodities are felt as like, oh, well, we need these things. But you also aren't necessarily even setting your own price. So why would anybody ever do that? Because the price is going to be as low as it can bear. It's always going to push downward. And the reason why people get into it is there's already an established market that will never go away. It's huge. It's gigantic. So commodities are feed into giant markets. The problem with commodities is it's a race to the bottom. And so the only way to really make money on it is in efficiencies, right? So you actually have to build into your production to become more efficient. That's how you're going to make more money, is your process behind the scenes. How do you get your product to market? And so that's what a commodity really is. It's based on, that shopping for you is starting to become interchangeable. And that's the key. And people go, there's no way in the creative industry we can do that. And I hasten to say that, well, it's already happening, and technology is finding the places where discernibility doesn't exist and is pushing its way in. So that's I think a sort of a quick primer on the notion of that's what it means to be a commodity, and that's what it means to be commoditized, is prices being the point of competition, and it's a price push down or downward price push that drives the market.
That's awesome. I think that, I think probably every industry is probably thinking like, yeah, this is happening to me, but I definitely feel like this is happening in the AV industry, especially because like, oh, hey, equipment's the same. Labor is relatively the same, right? Oh, I can compare them apples to apples perfectly, right? Like, I think we're definitely getting to that point where AV is getting commoditized. And I remember in the conversation that we had, and I think for most people when they listen to this, they're going to think to themselves, well, no, like what I do can't be, duplicated. It can't be compared to apples to anybody. And I challenge everyone listening to this now. I know if you have that hesitation, think to yourself, oh, am I truly doing it? And I remember I had a hesitation the first time you mentioned this too. And I'm like, no way. But as we thought more about it, I realized AV just is so commoditized, and just even recognizing there's a problem, I think is very important to evolving and changing as a business. And I think that the more we think that this isn't happening, the more it's just going to sweep us and hit us harder. And as used in the analogy, the morbid example of being T-boned from the side.
Well, Blockbuster never looked for what was coming, and they got wiped out. But I remember 6 or 7 years ago taking a tour of a warehouse from a lighting company. Shout out to Steve Way and the team at Fourth Wall in Boston. And he said, I learned at one point that clients are always going to see the lighting instrument as just a thing. There's no service. They just see the thing, and it's a unit. And so he then said, the only way we can start to make more money on this is to better the efficiency of our process. And this is before I learned all about commoditization. And I said, oh, that's brilliant. But it's brilliant because it helps them. But you're now trapped. You're now trapped in a price war, as opposed to an innovation war. Because the other side of it is to do your pricing based on value, which requires innovation, and that's a ladder up. You climb the ladder by providing far greater innovation, but by selling on value and not on what would be considered input or output. When you sell on input, which is time and materials, it's a variable. You say, oh, we're going to put in this number of hours, and it's going to cost you X, and it might cost you less because we finish it sooner. It might cost you Y because, well, it takes a little longer. But here's the value of the hours, and we're going to bill you on hours. What incentive does anyone have to go under on those hours? You make less money. If you do it on output, you say, all right, we're going to charge you a little more, but the price will remain what it is. We're going to deliver you a website. We're going to deliver you a building. We go higher, and we guarantee that it'll never shift. We assume the risk of how long does it take to do the project, and off you go. And those two things, the race for the pricing there is downward. But if you base it on value, there's a great analogy to this of value pricing, right? And the analogy is so if you look at the Nike logo, in today's dollars, it costs $200. Nike logo, probably beyond Coca-Cola and McDonald's, the most universally recognized corporate logo, and it costs $200. Pepsi, decade or two ago, said, all right, we're going to redo our logo, and it cost $1 million. What happened there? We can say absolutely that a logo can cost $200 and a logo can cost $1 million.
And I would say you're wrong.
How is that even possible? And that's because people buy based on value. Value, there's considered three elements: the gain in revenue, the reduction in cost, or intangible emotional values that exist. Mm-hmm. And that's the key to value-based pricing, is finding out from your client which are those. But at the time, Nike paid $200 for their logo. It was Phil Knight with a waffle iron in his trunk, and he paid some undergrad to draw him a logo for his sneaker company that was nothing. And Pepsi was a multinational, billions of dollars worth corporation. And the value there was how much risk was at stake. And so we can be in a world of inputs and outputs and pricing, or we can be in a world of value pricing. And I think that's the giant talk in this commodities talk, is where do we want to be?
Ooh, I like it. Okay, so I have, while we set the stage for us a little bit more, because I do think that everyone's really curious for ideas, and I think everyone's hammering, for some ideas on how they can evolve in the future. So my question is related to examples of people who have moved beyond commoditization. So get people kind of thinking like, where has this gone beyond? And I think in our like little pre-chat, we use the example of Fiverr, and I think we talked about logos. You can go on Fiverr and order a logo for $5 and have someone draw it up. Or you can go and hire an industry titan advertising agency to make $1 million logo. So like, can you give some examples and examples of maybe how Fiverr has done this, as well as how an industry can become commoditized and how it bounces back or evolves from there?
Sure. So commoditization and the opportunities to take advantage of commoditization happen when you've got a couple of things. One is you're always going to have people at the bottom, that we'll call them the strugglers, people who are hungry. Even better, we'll call them the hungries, right? So these are the people who are always willing to discount, do it for less. They don't have market share, and so they're trying to bully their way into market share with low pricing. And so organizations that have taken advantage of commoditization or leveraged it have taken advantage of the people willing to do this. So Fiverr is literally willing to pay people next to nothing, right? I mean, literally next to nothing to get a little bit of share they never would have gotten on their own because they don't have the marketing. So if you were to look at Airbnb, which started as couch surfing, I still hope couch surfing is alive and well, because that was
I think there's a site called Couchsurfing now that Airbnb's departed from it. It's like couchsurfing.com or something.
That was the original, right? And they said, okay, who wants to sell their couch for a couple of bucks, right? And when people said we're willing to do that, that's when it's the push started to happen. And this happens in incredibly complex scenario industries as well. The ones that were thought to be, it required too much of intellectual interpretation, like law, right? How are you ever going to get rid of law? Until LegalZoom said, we're going to find the elements of law that require almost nothing, and we're going to chop off every ounce of low-hanging fruit from the legal tree, right? So you're going to want a lawyer to take your case to the Supreme Court. You're going to want a lawyer when you get sued in a civil case, or even more so in a criminal case. But documents for a divorce, documents for selling a home, could we not commoditize this? Could we not make it so that it's exactly the same no matter where you are? And I was just at a retreat in Argentina, and this was the same thing with insurance, where they're saying, we want to eliminate all the middlemen and make all the money on insurance. It's like, how can you do that with insurance? And they're figuring out the system to eat away at the process of how you can do this in insurance. So creatively, the idea is just sell a few ideas. Architecture is a creative endeavor and an engineering endeavor. And people sell house plans. You just get your square plot of land. The house is already designed. Hand it to someone. Architects, gone. All gone? No. Low-hanging fruit? Yeah. You got an empty plot of land. Here's the plan. Hand it to a builder to build. Off you go. And so if you don't think it can happen, certainly in the creative industry, it can. Other examples, just to play up on this. I was at one of the major IBM shows, and of course, one of IBM's big things is AI. So artificial intelligence is going to drive 90% of commoditization. It sounds like an amazing future with AI, and it's going to eliminate your job. Okay, just so you know that. It'll make life wonderful, and it will put you out of a job. But they were having artificial intelligence develop artwork. They were having artificial intelligence write hit songs, right? And this is artificial intelligence. This is nobody. This is algorithms and programming. And if you don't think it can happen, 4 people are responsible for the last 25 years of #1 hits. Like all of Katy Perry's stuff, every #1 hit is coming out from 3 or 4 people who live in Sweden. I promise you, this is the truth. These are all songwriters. It's a machine. They crank them out. You buy the song from them. and you become a star, but they make most of the money. And that's what's going to start happening to all these creative endeavors. So, and I can tell you, we exchange a lot online about, you know, event planning online. Plan your event online. Right?
Just look at Pinterest, right?
Not even just Pinterest, but like, you know, if you plug these things in, we will tell you I mean, so your value way back when, you know, was always the Rolodex. I worked for a company once where we had in our contract to subcontractors, you couldn't wear your company shirt or park your company truck out front or put business cards out. Like, there was no marketing. We wanted none of our clients to see you showing up as a subcontractor, because why? They'd
Because the
call you
Rolodex
direct
was your
next time.
proprietary.
Industry was middlemen. You were making money being a middleman if you were a planner. And that's got killed by the internet, because now everybody can get to it. So the same types of things are going to start happening. We were at ILEA Live in, I think it was in Calgary, and it was, you know, Gig City. Book a band for your event. Find the band, see the ratings. It was the Yelp of bands. Rated, equipment, cost, boom, done. Bands were willing to go on, advertise on it, off you go. So we're seeing it a lot. It's as you said, it's happening. So it's just a matter of how much and where and when is it, you know, going to completely overtake us.
Yeah, and what are we going to do, right? So let's answer that first question you pose, which is, when is this going to happen, right? You've talked a little bit about, we started seeing some services like, yeah, like the gig cities, you know, these plans kind of come out. How long do you think, I mean, this is a really hard question, because I mean, we're all not futurists on here, but how long do you think that we have, and what are the key contributing factors that you think are moving towards that pure commoditization?
Well, I already think we're there, and I think it's going to be hard to know when are we there, because we're going to evolve as it pushes us, right? So it's going to start pushing,
like a wave pushing the boat further out.
And yeah, and we're going to be in a constant scale of evolution, right? It'll be a continuum that we don't realize. And I don't think we'll be dead. I think we'll evolve. I think some companies will, quote unquote, survive. And I think those are the ones that get into value-based pricing. I honestly do. Because there you're talking about human decisions of purchasing and leveraging that. And you're never going to get rid of humans making purchasing decisions. We might get rid of humans making purchasing. That might happen too, but for now. So I think we're already there. In fact, I think we're already being pushed. I think we're already seeing it into the edges. I think things like venue selection and purchase is happening online. I think as 5G comes online in the next year, the amount of things that are possible for our learning, for our learning products that we're going to be putting out. You know, I was able to walk through 7 different venues around the world, literally every ounce of the venue. Now we've been able to do that for 6 or 7, 8 years very well, but when 5G comes out, I mean, it's going to be, the virtual walkthroughs are going to be like that. Every venue is going to be that way. So what happens to having to do site visits? What happens to having a salesperson? You're going to have a person in India who walks you through and conducts a site inspection for you, with VR goggles, right? So I mean, that's ready to go. And so the question is not when is it upon us. The question is potentially what survives. So you can look at this 2 ways. It's what pieces will still remain the same, if any. And then you keep saying I took the position. I was playing devil's advocate.
Okay, fair enough.
I offered an opinion of don't save the ship, repurpose the ship, right? So it was, why are we worried about stopping what's happening? Because we should just realize it's going to overrun us. If you're smart, you're the person who's the first one to found LegalZoom. You're the first person for graphic design to found Fiverr. You're the person to found. You take advantage of you see the opportunities that are coming and take advantage of that. And people are. So those are the 2 options. It's kind of like identify what's going to be saved and go for it and ride that and be the best at that. And then it's the Wild West of where is this pushing us take the greatest advantage. The hard part with the second one is you're still always guessing what technology is, where it's going to take you. You're in a constant, the tumult. The wave is constantly breaking if you're constantly trying to stay in front of it and take care of the opportunities. But who wouldn't want to be Netflix in streaming services, right? Like,
That's true.
10
That's
years of
very true.
Netflix, I'll take it. If Netflix gets knocked out of existence in 2 years, I'd still want to be Netflix. So I
Totally.
think that's the big thing to recognize is you can take two paths: value pricing, which is big and completely worth it and incredibly difficult, and that's why more people don't do it. And then there's get in front and find the opportunities.
Good point. So we're starting to get some questions in from the audience. Before we start to dive 100% into what can we do in the future, because obviously this depends a lot based on the company and kind of what they provide. But good question coming in from the audience, which is a question I had as well, is the relationship with procurement and bidding processes, right? And how has that really changed things? And maybe now we can start talking about like how to evolve in the future as we're being commoditized. Is that we're getting these RFPs that say like this is exactly what I need, and if you're anything like me, I'm like, oh, I need a meeting. Let's set up a meeting. Let's talk. I want to add value. And I think there's more to this, right? But then more and more we're getting the pushback of no, follow this perfect RFP that I believe defines everything. How do you think that's affecting things? And what do you think we can do to avoid that as well?
So procurement's driving this, right? That's procurement's job. Procurement's job is to standardize and then lower the price to the advantage of the buyer. And in order to standardize, it typically sets the rules of pricing. It actually creates your pricing for you. And I've seen this at major companies. I had one of the most eye-opening experiences. I think I was 3 years into the industry with Bristol Myers Squibb, where they saw our profit margin accidentally on one of the projects we did for them. And they came back and said, this is never going to happen. If you ever want to work with us again, here's your profit margin. And that was based on procurement. And they said, you're going to show us all costs and you're going to make this amount. And it was an entirely unrealistic amount. You could not run a business on it. And yet that's what they're telling suppliers with the hopes of somebody's going to take it. So we'll deal with it. But procurement, if you think about it, these are the people who have to buy office space, carpets, health plans, pens and pencils, light bulbs for the office, travel plans. What do these people possibly know about the creative world? And literally their bargaining is their size and scope. We're a big account, and that's what they leverage, and that's what they hope. They go, and so you're going to have to push yourself down to this amount. And I think too many people don't go back to the relationship. Remember how you said, "Oh, I want a meeting. I want to talk." You've probably had those meetings. You've probably had it with the people who are looking for your services, because procurement isn't calling you up saying, "We'd like to get something to you." It's the people who are in the meetings department, the people who are in the marketing department, whatever it may be. And one of the strategies that I've learned is before it gets to procurement, after your quote unquote pitch, before you leave, it's now we're going to tell you procurement is going to come in and ruin this. You actually tell that your coworkers are going to come in and ruin what we've talked about. And I just want to let you know, I want you to understand why we are this value. I want you to understand why this is. If procurement asks us to push down, I hate to say it, but we're going to walk. And because we think this is fair, you obviously believe it's fair. Hopefully in that meeting, you've come to it's fair. And when procurement comes up and says, this price needs to come down, this is no good, you need to drop it by X number of dollars, you say, thank you, but no, you can talk to Mary or Mike or whoever and tell them that we're out. So hard with an RFP. RFP is another business decision. I say we don't do RFPs, and currently
I know. I'm
waiting.
sorry.
Oh,
Yeah, we don't do RFPs, but like sometimes you're like, oh god, this is such a great opportunity.
yes, it's very, very true. And so it's one of those things that's difficult because it eliminates every positive ability of selling and but more so of purchasing. I'm sure the purchasers hate RFPs. One, they probably have to have some fiduciary responsibility to collect 3 or 4 bids, and they have to say we have to be somewhere in the middle, right? We don't want the lowest, and we can't take the highest, so we got to find what the middle is. So there's probably rules that they're following for that. But what an awful process for them. How do you even tell? How do you even tell? I remember putting in a 90-page proposal on an RFP,
Oh my god.
and they said, we want you to come in and talk about it. And I said, great. What day? And they're like, well, it's this day, but you've got 20 minutes. So what are we going to talk about in 20 minutes? What? It's 90
Yeah.
pages. It should be a 2 or 3 hour meeting that we sit and talk about the plans. And anyway, so RFPs are a whole other decision, I think. But procurement departments drive the race for commoditization. Make all the services the same. See it as a meeting. We are buying meeting services. We are doing it for 200 people. We are going to do it in Albuquerque, right? And so everyone should be exactly the same. That price, that's a product, and it's either $9.50, and if you come in at $9.75, well, you're out, and that's the problem.
Mm. And
What do
I
you think,
think
Joe?
a lot of people out there going, preach, preach, preach. Um, so I want to jump into, I think we've made a really good case. There's so many good ways that we can take us down. I want to talk about like how we can start evolving our companies to be this next level. And we started talking about this, I think, a little bit during the session about like and you mentioned things like using automation and things like that. Where do you see companies, creative companies moving towards, and what sort of ways do you think that they can actionably start to ride this wave? Using
Well,
all like ocean metaphors today too.
so so identifying low-hanging fruit. I'll give you. I'm actually going to give you an example. And commoditization and or standardization has existed in our industry for a while. Um, it's quote unquote been around, and probably starting more so in the world of venues. But there's stuff that's off the shelf that you've been able to buy for decades now. But I do recall a story one of my bosses had said where he got in the event industry, was meeting a woman from California whose churn and burn in the commoditization was proms out in California. And the prom business was rent 8 incredible venues. And in California, proms are different than East Coast. East Coast is get dressed up, go to a hotel, you party, you dance, you're there all night, you're doing your thing, everybody goes to an after party and it's done. California, it's you go with your friends somewhere for dinner, but then there's hopefully this big raucous after party. That's the big thing where everybody comes together. And they just created 8 events. So this was the Mardi Gras event in this venue. This is the beach event in this venue. This is the I Love the 80s event in this venue, whatever. And they just reset it 5 times, 5 weekends over prom season. They would just reset each venue. And in the beginning, you just came in and off the shelf went, we want that party for that date. And they made made their money on volume discounts from the venues, right? So this is exactly what commoditization is okay, here's the event. We can't get any more than this. There can only be so many people in this venue. So what we have to do is lower the price of our venue. That's where we're going to make our margin, because we can't do more, right? And that's how commoditization works. But it's been here for a while. But it's the low-hanging fruit that you have to identify. And then if you can systemize that low-hanging fruit, well, then you've got it, right? That's the ultimate in commoditization, is the system. How do you get the product in someone's hands? I mean, that's what Uber figured out, right? How do you get the product in somebody's hands the fastest, the easiest, with less mess, That's what they want, and nobody cares. I don't care if I'm in the back of a Toyota or the back of a Lexus. I literally just want the product of A to B. Just move A to B. And they got that low-hanging fruit, and they're knocking taxis because taxis weren't anything. Black cars might still be around. Somebody wants luxury, they want separation, they want elevation. That's going to be there. But the low-hanging fruit was there's so many of us who don't care what car we're in. Just get us the car quickly. And then I don't want a receipt. I don't want a receipt. I just want credit card in, out, track it, boom, done.
So it's almost tied a little bit with ease. How can you make the process not only, like take the low hanging fruit of taxis, right, and then automate it, but also make it easier for the consumer as well?
So much barrier to purchase is how afraid people are of something, and in fact, fear is one of the top price increasers. Right? People are terrified of what? Taking care of yourself or being healthy at the doctor. People are terrified of being in court. People are terrified of their finances, right? And yet, so what companies try to do is simplify. Oh my God, just simplify. So let's look at tax preparers. Do you know who commoditized tax preparation? Tax preparers.
TurboTax and
H&R
TurboTax.
Block. They realized it, and they said, we can either be the first ones to make software that someone can just do at home, or we can be Blockbuster and be out of business. And so they commoditized. So there's low-hanging fruit that's there in creative worlds that exist. And based on whatever technology that can help you, you connect the technology to that low-hanging fruit, and you can take a big chunk. You can take a big chunk of various industries and get rid of the human that's standing there. You get rid of the elevator operator. There's no more elevator operators. Why aren't we up in arms over the fact there's not a guy standing there moving a dial, taking you to whatever floor? We don't need it anymore. There's no guy carrying a big cube of ice up the stairs to your apartment and delivering it to put in the bottom of your refrigerator to keep everything cool, right?
You don't have someone connecting your telephone lines to each other.
So, there are those things that exist, and if you instead of fighting it, or instead of identifying what's going to remain and being a value priced company, which is what you're going to have to do to avoid commoditization, find that low hanging fruit and automate it.
So I want to talk about.
That's what's killing everything.
Examples for people who might be struggling, like my business, I can't automate this. Can you provide any quick examples for how maybe you've applied it, and I can provide some examples for how we've automated some things as well. But how sort of ideas do you have around automating and simplifying and using technology to leverage on that?
Goodness. So you could literally be the person that if you've got a city, let's say you're in a city and you've got the top 10 venues, booking the venue, plugging in a number of people who are going to be there automatically kicks out. You pick the size of and the layout that you want, and it shows you a floor plan. You pick linens, you pick a floral design. There's 8 of them. Ding, 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 ding. And you pick a menu. You just select it. Is what you get. Think about the McDonald's menus. McDonald's used to have like a million. They got 4 things, right? It's right there. There's no. It's these are your choices. This is all you get. Go, because of speed, because of automation, and because of profit. That's process, right? That's output, or input rather. That's time and materials. They're lessening time and materials, and we don't care. So if you give them 8 menus from this one caterer or whatever, they've just done inputs, and then it all shows up. Now you figure out the system of the inputs, and it just showing up. Grubhub, right? Restaurants, order, it comes to you, done. You're not even picking anything up, right? So imagine some of the low-hanging fruit that can happen. Warby Parker is another good example. You need to go to the store and try a million things on to know which one looks best. Warby Parker, no, you don't. Not at all. We'll send them to you. We are eliminating the trip to the store. I mean, pretty soon someone's going to just do it online. Picture of you, glasses, right? With
I think
all
Warby
kinds of
Parker does that already.
yeah, AR's it's AR's making that happen. See it already. So things like layouts can happen like that. Things like
You look at all seated, right?
yeah. So people are just you're gonna put the smallest amount of inputs in that are going to be so user friendly on an interface, and it's going to design and order it for you, and in it comes. And if you're smart, you get the 12 people involved, 12 groups, and they work together to manage. They know, oh, it's option B. Option B needs to be ready by 12 o'clock. Put it in. And we talk about bending to the curve, right? So that bending, we're eventually going to be like, difference doesn't matter. I got it done, right? That's low-hanging fruit. I got the creative done. I don't care that it was one of 8 options. My event is here, so God bless. And I saved so much money by going with Geico.
Well, I think you bring up a really good point too. Like, how can you leverage technology? And people out there might be thinking to themselves, well, I don't know how to make a tool that can do the layouts and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, that's, I think, a really important point that you make, is that we're moving beyond just being the AV company, the planner, the venue, and you have to become almost a technology company. I mean, you look at Uber; they don't describe themselves as a taxi rideshare company. They call themselves a technology company. They have tons of engineers on their team to build these tools and things like that. So you have to kind of think like that. How can you maybe pivot to a new model and incorporate that? Like, people say to me, like, well, how did you Endless become so authoritative in the AV space? And it's because I stopped calling myself just an AV company. I call myself a media company that just happens to do AV. So we started pumping out podcasts and things like that, right?
Right.
And I think you have to make that shift if you want to make it. You can't think of yourselves as that traditional model as well.
Yeah, I mean, you can be the driver in the Uber model, or you can be the algorithm creators. And
that's deep.
but who do you want to be? Think about it. I mean, who do you want to be? I don't want to be that asshole CEO. That's for sure. I mean, that guy's let's talk Lyft. Let's stop talking Uber. I am all about Lyft. Lyft. I love Lyft. Yes, you don't have, if you love doing what you do you have to, are you going to be forced to do this? Maybe. I mean, the last of the video.
Well, you could still be that CPA who's still doing the tax practice for, like, and focusing on high end, right? Or you can choose which one.
I mean, the last Blockbuster did just close, or I think there's only one left. No, I think the last one just closed officially. I forgot what the news was. Either it's the very last one or the very last one just closed. But all right, that took a few years, but it was rapid. Will that be us? Who knows? The future of shopping. So grocery shopping. I remember seeing this. It was in Genius, and this is all the QR age, which some people call the demise of QRs. And they thought, if you're still using QRs are still huge and they're big, and I see them in meetings all the time now. So kudos to QR for still hanging in there and doing their thing. Good for you, QR technology. But subways, right? So you walk home in a subway and there's just a wall of QR codes of products from a grocery store. And you boop, 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 with your phone, pay, time for delivery. There's no grocery store anymore in that. There's no grocery store anymore in that. It just comes. It just
shows up. They had to break that model.
It's a whole new model. And I think this was in Korea. It's like, this is how they so, I mean, things are going to get like that. Right now, literally, we're doing all our shopping on Amazon. Things are going, brick and mortar is going away, and now you're dealing with depots. So, and delivery. So what does that mean for us? That's the question to be asking, is as expectations of everyday things in our lives shift, what does that mean with that shift with things like events? So I give you the example of McDonald's going from, there's 22 different things on the menu to there's 8. Nobody cares. Literally, the shift has happened. What does that mean for us? If you only get 8 options, Don't know. But ask the people who are selling blueprints online for homes. Maybe there's not only 8, maybe there's 50, but there's only 50. We're not talking about customization. So we need to be asking that question: is, what does it mean for us?
So I have a good question. You mentioned a little bit earlier how like kind of inputs versus outputs, and one of the inputs was clocking hours, and how we love on our invoices to say, oh, you're getting event planning services are 100 hours, and then we use Harvest to track all of our
Right.
time and know when we're getting close to budget. Do you think that to combat commoditization and evolve beyond it, do you think that clocking hours and tracking and that sort of stuff is needed, or do you think that you should get rid of
It's
it?
got to go. And that's another scary thing, because there's some people who don't. Okay, so here's the worst: you bill on hours and you don't track hours. Okay, so that's just bad business. But
You commoditize yourself, but you're not commoditizing the
there's
process,
so
right?
many people who do that. And just think about it: we all do that. It's a day rate, and how many of us are pulling 18 hours on a day rate? Like, that's nuts, right? But and then you have, all right, hours in, hours out, and there's the 60 45 20 of make sure that your workforce is always working at 60% capacity at least, and that your overhead payroll is 45% of adjusted gross income, and that should allow you a good 20% profit. And so time frame, right? Boom. But that locks you in. That's it. That's all you're going to get, and you're going to focus on that, and you're going to say that's our capacity. Now, if you move away from that and get into value-based, you have to start looking at, you don't start clocking hours, but you have to start looking at overall costs. So the way you track the success of your business shifts from something that is seemingly simple, hours. Side note, I don't know any company successful at accurately tracking hours. There's not a single employee who tracks hours well. I'm the boss. I can barely track my hours, right? And I'm disciplined about it, and I suck at it. Right? And so that's a problem in and of itself. That was a sidebar. But if we get to the value-based side of it, now you're talking about, what's the value of something like failure of innovation, right? Innovation requires failure. So how much time is billable hours in a company that's innovative? Well, how much time do you give to allow people to experiment and fail? If you can double the value of what you do, would you do it? As opposed to fight for the price on the way down, but work on process and time and hours and billables. Eventually, if you're a billables person, the commoditization is going to come to you. And that's the issue. And so tracking hours is definitely, you can't say we're going to base this on value, but we're going to track our hours. Because then what you're saying as a company is we value hours, which is, there's dissonance there that doesn't line up. Everybody's like, well, how come? It's the same way when we buy on stuff, right? We buy on hours. If you want to shift to value, but then you go, well, wait a second, you're only giving 2 people for 2 days. That shouldn't be that much. And it's like, are you buying on hours? But you're selling on value. You got to learn to buy on value too. That's the hardest part about value pricing, is there's a very big shift. The argument is the shift is worth the pain and the time. And it's difficult because it requires relationships, and it requires practice of new skills of listening to clients and establishing value. Right? Pepsi's logo cost $1 million because of the risk. Because of the risk involved of changing a logo. So I think just before they had changed their logo, they had changed, who do they own? Tropicana. I think it was Tropicana Juices. And they changed their branding on it. And they saw a year-long 20% drop in profit. And they immediately went back to their old branding, and prices came back up. And they're like, that was directly attributable to what we did. Think about New Coke, right? And they said, all right, we could lose 20% of a product line's profit in a year just on branding alone. is it worth it for us to spend $1 million on getting it right with a company to what we
The first
hopefully
time.
eliminate the risk on? And that's a value that they had at that time. You have to assess every client's value each time out, every event, every product, and their position in the world, their context in the world, to know what they value at that moment. And for Pepsi, it was, don't destroy a brand with a shift. They knew they needed to make a shift, but they're like, there's so much risk involved. Look at what happened with Tropicana. So that's the hard part with value-based pricing, is knowing what's at stake. What does this mean for the client? How much value is there? If you have the potential to do an event that drives $10 million in sales, is it fair to say, this event is going to cost you $1 million to do? It's 10%. Would you pay 10% for 90% outcome? Would you pay that in a commission, right? But some people go, no, but what you're providing is only X, Y, and Z. And it's like, but the value to you is massive. It's tough, it's difficult, and it's not scientific it's not mathematical the way ours are. And that's the hard part. But it avoids the push down. It avoids the price-based commoditization.
Amazing. Time is flying by, and we definitely do need to wrap up. But I think we bring up a really good point. I mean, this is already happening. You have to decide whether you want to ride this or if you want to stay where you are and stay not evolve with everything going on. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways you kind of had in that as well, is that, like, look, yeah, you can keep things the same and you can be the CPA who has a couple clients, and that's totally fine. It's your choice in what you want to do. But if you want to complain, you want to change what you got going, you have to make a change, right? It's the Michael Jackson song. If you want to be a change, make a change. So going into a last couple of questions that we always ask on the show, when it comes to commoditization, do you have any sort of favorite resources that you want to look towards? I didn't even get a chance to talk to you about the proprietary stuff that you're working on it as well. But maybe as an example where someone can see kind of how you've developed a proprietary portion. But what sort of resources do you have for people to look at, maybe examples of evolved businesses that aren't being commoditized, or where you kind of learned this thought process that you kind of came through?
So, well, first and foremost, I want to thank Alan and I know David Merrill from AOO out in LA put together an amazing forum for us with ILEA. So being involved and being part of pre-made conversations is huge. One of the resources that came out of that for me was you can buy a manual. You can buy a manual with worksheets, or you can buy a manual with worksheets with full training sessions from a guy called Blair Enns, ENNS. And Win Without Pitching is one of his books, but he's a creative agency guy. He talks about some of the stuff, and he definitely talks about commoditization in the creative industries, and gives an incredible amount of steps to get up and out from under product-based pricing and to move to value-based pricing. So get away from time and materials, get away from output, get into value, and how to conduct those conversations, how to deal with clients, how to structure your pitches. It's fantastic. It's not the only resource, but it's probably a great place to start. Probably be like $100 investment. Is that worth it? I think so. If you can't make $100 extra on your next proposal, maybe you shouldn't be in business to pay for that. But and you can read anywhere on the internet about commoditization of the marketing industry or advertising or architecture. I mean, there's articles everywhere about what it means and where it's going. And so being well read is a very easy thing to do in this day and age. The data is everywhere. So always one of my favorite pieces of information is take 2 hours and go down rabbit holes with the topic in mind, and see where it leads you. And you'll be able to get informed.
I love it. All right. Now to my final question. It doesn't have to be commoditization based, but number one tip that you kind of have for planners out there. Maybe it's something related to commoditization if we want to tie it all together. But what sort of tips do you have for planners when it comes to planning their events in the next year?
To planning their events.
Yeah, we can do that, or for their business. I'll allow either.
Well, so I'd rather answer that one because I mean, there's a million different ways and there's a million different companies, and I don't know, but almost everybody's in business, or chances are if you're listening to a commoditization conversation, you're running the business. But I think what's key and crucial is never stop talking. And that means being involved in conversations like this, overhearing them or asking questions on them in the question chat space. But pushing for and asking for those conversations too. Be in those groups where you are bringing peers together, and stop discussing latest or greatest in the path that you're on. Start discussing who's coming down this way or this way. Because remember, the disruption is going to get you from the side. It's not coming right at you. Everyone would hear it and see it and know it if that's the case. That's why it's not disruptive. But set up these talks, think about these in your own markets, and invite lateral people from related but lateral industries to you. So something that is creative but might not be, anyone who's in the music business is going to tell you, yeah, people write a song for nothing, and you just go online and say, write me a song, and somebody does it, and everything's getting disrupted. So hearing their solutions is sometimes the best way to come up with your solution as well. So keep talking, keep conversations going. And if you have to use an industry association like MPI or ILEA, do it.
Amazing. This has been an incredible episode. As evidenced by how much I was just sitting back and listening, there were so many good knowledge drops along the way. So I'm just super duper thankful to have you on board, Kevin, for this, because I mean, this was just I think super impactful to think outside the box and how our industry is thinking. So Kevin, seriously amazing. Thank you for having us on the show.
Thank you. It's absolutely my pleasure.
So we are going to wrap up though, guys. If you are tuning in live, you're awesome. If you're not tuning in live, what the heck are you doing? The best place to watch this is every single Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, event-icons.com. We have a chat in there, and that's where everybody's at right now. Hello to the chat. I want to give some shout outs to Brent. We have N. Benden. It gives a chance for anyone to name themselves whatever they want. So sometimes you get weird usernames. Also shouts to Reed as well for joining us, and a ton of others, which I think I could go on here forever. And to the anonymous guest 9426, guest 1094, I think we can go on here forever. But thank you guys so much for tuning in live. You want to join these guys in the chat, this is where we're having the conversation and continuing it going along. If you are listening to on your favorite podcast software, Spotify, Pocket Casts, iTunes, yada, yada, yada. Go sign up there as well, because we will email you some of our top episodes and everything like that as well, which is really, really cool. And also an invite to our exclusive Facebook group, which Kevin's super duper active on as well. So you can always feel free to shoot him a question and can continue this conversation, which is where we're going to keep going. But yeah, thank you. Everyone's saying thank you in the chat. Thank you guys for tuning in. So, and if you have ideas for episodes, feel free to hit us up in the Facebook group, and we will see you guys all there as well. But thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Kevin, for being on the show. And everybody, we'll see you next week on Event Icons.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of #EventIcons. To catch the transcription and all of the resources mentioned, head to www.helloendless.com/blog. This week's episode will be posted and available by next Tuesday. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway
and join the social conversation. Sponsored by Little Bird Told Media.
Just tag your post with #EventIcons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on #EventIcons.